Well, hope everybody's having a great week so far. It's a little rainy on this Wednesday night that I'm recording this. I'm actually recording it at church, and so I hope you guys are doing well, and I hope you've had a great start to your week. And I know that God's got good plans for the rest of your week, um, and I just encourage you to keep on keeping on. You know, I had a moment with God this morning, and just His word was to me was just endurance. He's building in this time and season with us. He's building our endurance. So I just want to encourage you to just hang in there, keep going, don't give up, and just want that to be an encouragement for you as you move on to the week. So we're going to get into our study. We're continuing our study. I'm calling A True Son, and it is Paul's writings to Timothy. Paul calls Timothy a true son, and we know that he is a spiritual father to Timothy. He's training Timothy, and Timothy is the pastor at the church of Ephesus. And so we've covered kind of a couple of different chapters so far, and it's just been good words about worship and about making sure that we have a strong foundation in the Word. And so we come into chapter 3, and Paul really dives into now. He's helping Timothy as a pastor build church leadership. And anytime you're in a leadership position, you need people under you. You need a foundation of workers and leaders who are kind of have the same mission and vision. And so just like Timothy, we're living in a society in our churches where our pastors really need our help and support, and need men who have a strong grasp of the mission and vision of the church. And so that's really where Paul is coming from here. He's going to talk specifically about the characteristics and the character of church leaders and deacons and all of that. And so we're going to kind of dive in a little bit, and this will be a little bit different structure than maybe I've done in the past, but I just kind of want to make sense of this. And so I do want to say as we work into this that while you may not be a deacon or church leader right now, what Paul is doing here is he's setting out a set of criteria and some character traits and some the type of men that God is willing to use. And now, certainly, we all fall short of some of these areas, and I know that we do. But it's something for us to aspire to, and maybe God is wanting to get us to the place to where we can serve Him in ways that He needs us to. So we're going to dive into this, and I hope that it makes sense, and I hope that you can get something of it. And I want to encourage you. Excuse me, my goodness. I want to encourage you as you work through this to allow God to move in your heart, because I know at Friendship, I know we definitely have places where we need people to serve and we need people to lead. And so I want you to just allow God to use your heart and mind, to let Him open your heart and mind to possibly being a leader in the church and serving in a capacity that the church needs. So I want to encourage you as we move forward. So we're going to be in 1 Timothy chapter 3 this week, and we're going to start with verses 2 through 5. I'm going to read those to you. It says, "So a church leader must be a man whose life is above reproach. He must be faithful to his wife. He must exercise self-control, live wisely, and have a good reputation. He must enjoy having guests in his home, and he must be able to teach. He must not be a heavy drinker or be violent. He must be gentle, not quarrelsome, and not love money. He must manage his own family well, having children who respect and obey him. For if a man cannot manage his own household, how can he take care of God's church?" So Paul begins with talking about the character traits of church leaders. So I'm just going to kind of go through and just have some talking points about each one of them, and then we'll move on. So he talks about having a life that is above reproach. Wow, what a standard that Paul is setting for church leaders. But why is Paul setting this standard? Why is Paul setting the standard for church leaders? Well, it's because people look up to church leaders. And how many of you know, how many of you have seen church leaders or preachers who have fallen, and they've fallen big? And what happens as a result of that? Well, God's witness is hurt whenever that happens. So Paul is saying he wants us to live a life that is above reproach. Are we going to be perfect? Absolutely not. But we need to strive daily to live our life as God would have us to, and be quick to be repentant whenever we fall short. He says he must be faithful to his wife. Paul there is talking about commitment, and he's talking about faithfulness. And, if a man is not faithful to his wife, what is he going to be faithful to? He's setting a standard for his life that's going to cause people to question his ability to be faithful. So obviously being unfaithful to your wife is a sin. And so Paul is really pointing out here, hey, we need to have commitment as leaders, and we need to be faithful as leaders. He talks about exercising self-control. I think of lots of areas where we could probably work better at exercising self-control. Eating, staying on our phones too much, watching TV too much. What are we spending our time with? What are we doing in excess that maybe we shouldn't? So that self-control is, what can we control? Are we able to control our emotions? Or do we let our anger get out of control? And we'll talk about that in just a second. So exercising that self-control. Can we hold our tongue when we need to hold our tongue instead of spouting? Can we just scroll past the post on Facebook rather than commenting or sharing to some degree? So it's exercising our self-control. Live wisely. Paul encourages church leaders here to use wisdom. We have so many things at our disposal. God's given us His Word, and we can, the whole book of Proverbs, much of it talks about wisdom and the value of wisdom and how we need to use it. And so he's encouraging here church leaders to live wisely and have a good reputation. It's not saying that we don't have a past. We all have a past. But what's going on in our life now? What is our reputation among people? If our reputation is that we're a hothead, or that we're a flirt, or if our reputation is that we waste money, or we gamble it away at Tunica, or whatever. I'm not getting into that, but I'm just saying, what is our reputation as men? When people say your name, what are their thoughts? What do they think about? And so it's being a good reputation. It says he must enjoy having guests in his home. I really pull from that about being sociable, being able to be approachable by people. When you're in a position of leadership, you're going to have to deal with people one way or another. And so this person, church leaders, people in authority, they need to be able to be sociable. They need to be able to talk with people. And so that's what he's talking about here. And then he says he must be able to teach. If you're going to teach something, you kind of have to know a little bit about it. And so I believe that church leaders need to be students of the Word. We're studying the Word. We're learning more about God. We never stop. I firmly believe, just even as a person, that we need to be a lifelong learner. And we never stop learning about things. And so that includes the Word. God reveals things layer by layer to us as we get into the Word. And so on top of being a student of the Word, then we need to be able to turn around and teach others about that. So that's what he's saying here. He says, must not be a heavy drinker. Pretty self-explanatory. Not a heavy drinker, or be violent. You're not going to want somebody who has a violent history or is a violent person. They're hard to trust. They never know what reaction you're going to get from them. Must be gentle, not quarrelsome, not love money. You've got people who think money is the end all be all, and sometimes we get in trouble. Judas, one of Judas's issues was he loved money. He was kind of the bookkeeper, and he He loved money, and so that's one of the issues that got in his way. And then he must manage his own family well. And then Paul talks about children who respect and obey their parents. And we live in a society where our kids are really bombarded with lots of images and lots of messages, and it's important for us as men, as fathers, to really take a stand and be protective of our kids. And yes, we have to correct our kids. That's part of what God asks us to do. God disciplines us when we need it, but we as fathers need to discipline our kids, and that takes so many shapes and sizes. But we need to be willing to manage and take care of our own household. And then Paul talks about in verses 6 and 7, he talks about a church leader must not be a new believer because he might become proud, and the devil would cause him to fall. Also, people outside the church must speak well of him so that he will not be disgraced and fall into the devil's trap. We're really quick sometimes to place new believers because there's so much energy there. There's so much energy in the Word. There's so much energy for God, and their lives have been changed. And we're really quick sometimes to put them in places that they're just not mature enough to handle. So that's important for us in saying this. We as men, we need to mature in our faith. The Bible talks about we need to stop relying on just the milk of the Word, and we need to get into the meat of the Word. And so we need to mature. And so what Paul is saying here is not only is he telling Timothy as the leader, be careful who you put as a leader. They may be too immature, but I think he's speaking to those people who maybe aren't as mature as they need to be, and he's telling them, hey, it's time to mature. It's time to grow up. And certainly I know God's doing that in me right now, for sure. I really feel this is a huge time for me to really mature and grow in God, and I think he wants to do that in all of us. And so if we're going to be a leader, God's wanting us to mature and grow in him. And then in verses 8 through 13, Paul is talking about deacons again. And so, deacons are a different level of church. I know in our church Friendship, I know we're a district-dependent church. We don't have deacons right now, but I know that's something that I know we all would want to work toward to become a sovereign church again. And so, some of the characteristics are the same that we just went over for church leader. He talks about somebody who's well respected, has integrity, not a heavy drinker or dishonest with money. I love this. Committed to the mystery of faith now revealed. Again, that goes back to, are we committed to really grow deeper with God? Are we committed within ourselves to really have a walk with God where we really are uncovering those layers that God has for us to seek out? Living with a clear conscience. Let them be closely examined. That's tough. Letting people kind of examine our life and say, okay, are you able to do that? Is this something that you can do? How they examine us is they look at our witness. What's our witness? What kind of life are we leading? And there's a lot of ways that we demonstrate that. It's through our walk, how we treat people, how we treat our families. What are we contributing to the church? Social media is a huge deal. Before I ever hire somebody, I look for their social media accounts and make sure that they're not posting things that they shouldn't or inappropriate things, because they need to be people who are closely examined because they're going to be working with kids. And so the same way applies to us. We need to be careful how we're living our life and how we're presenting our life to others. He talks about wives must be respected and not slander others. They must exercise self-control, be faithful in all they do. Deacon must be faithful to his wife, manage his children and household well. The whole idea is that we work together, and you all know that if you're in a kind of an unequal yoked house where one person's a believer and one is not, that's a tough place to be. You're not always agreeing, and it's kind of a tough place to be. And then if you're in a leadership position and you're not on the same page as a couple or as a family, that puts you in a difficult spot. And so really Paul is saying here, as a family, be like-minded, There's statistics out there that say that, men, if a man in the family comes to know Jesus or is involved in church, I believe the percentage is somewhere around 90% of the rest of the family will come. In 90% of those families, the whole family becomes involved in church, becomes saved. So those percentages are huge. And so men, we lead by example. And so I want to encourage you with that. And I love this next part. Sometimes we fail to communicate the whole thing. And Paul is not going to leave these instructions to Timothy unsaid. Even though he'd rather say them in person, he's not going to leave it unsaid. So in 1 Timothy 3:14 and 15, he says this: I am writing these things to you now, even though I hope to be with you soon, so that if I am delayed, you will know how people must conduct themselves in the household of God. This is the church and the living God, which is the pillar and foundation of the truth. Paul is saying, hey, I want to tell you in person, and I guarantee you if Paul and Timothy got together, Paul detailed these out a little bit deeper in person probably. But he didn't want to leave it unsaid. So he went ahead and forwarded it on. He clearly communicated. And, guys, we need to do that as leaders and men, for those who are under us, even in our families. We need to be clear and precise in our communication to them so that they know exactly what we need. We know that they know what we're trying to accomplish, and we all can be on the same page. And so we need to clearly communicate those things. And then the last one, I love this last verse, and it's verse 16. And it's like Paul has done all these instructions. And then, at the end of the, sometimes in the pep talk of a coach at the beginning of a game, before they go out there, he's giving the instructions and he's telling them what they need to be doing. And he says, oh, by the way, and then he gives this huge, rousing, energizing moment at the very end of his speech to get them pumped up. And I think that's what Paul is doing here. In verse 16, he says, without question, this is the great mystery of our faith. Christ was revealed in human body and vindicated by the Spirit. He was seen by angels and announced to the nations. He was believed in throughout the world and taken to heaven in glory. And so Paul's giving all these instructions and says, oh, by the way, here we go. This is the mystery that we're teaching that's being revealed to us. Christ came in human body. He was here on earth. He was vindicated by the Spirit. He was seen by angels, announced to the nations. He was believed in throughout the world and taken to heaven in glory. And so Paul is just this huge celebration for Timothy and the church to know that we serve a living God that was demonstrated here on earth, and power to save, power to heal, and he's up in heaven in all of his glory, ready to bring us back home. And so Paul is just celebrating that in the work of the church. So, guys, as we conclude this lesson tonight, I want to go back to a verse I haven't read to you yet. It is the key verse of 1 Timothy chapter 3. And it says, this is a trustworthy saying. If someone aspires to be a church leader, he desires an honorable position. And I just want to encourage you this week as you read, go back and reread that chapter, 1 Timothy chapter 3, and just see where God might put in your heart maybe an area to work on, or maybe he wants you to be a church leader and he wants to place that on your heart. Because I guarantee you there are places to serve. There are places where we need you to lead at church. And so I just want to encourage you guys this week. Have a great rest of your week. And we're going to be back again next week in 1 Timothy chapter 4. Have a good one.